My name is Casper Corus. The main part of my research here at TU Delft is about how people respond to various types of travel information. In this presentation, I'll focus on a specific but key bit of that research, being how people value travel information. What is the perceived value of travel information for travelers when they move from A to B through transport networks? To start with, let me give a very brief overview of the technological developments that we've seen in the field of travel information the past few decades. Obviously, we've known for decades and even centuries that we've been using maps and timetables to move from A to B. Since more recently, say the 1970s, 80s, we've also been seeing travel information, specifically traffic information, being delivered by means of a car radio. Still, many people use this type of information when they drive their car. However, there's been a lot of technological developments that have very much pushed this research field to the edge of what we scientifically know, being a very obvious example, travel information being delivered through the internet. In the 1990s, mostly this started out by people in their homes trying to get travel information before they left by accessing the internet. For example, the Dutch railways have a very good traffic information website, but also the ANWB, our car drivers union, has a very good traffic information website. This is now commonly being used by a lot of travelers. Apart from these initiatives, there's been a very big spending initiative from the government by providing travel information through what we call variable message signs, which are hung above freeways and where people can actually see, for example, travel times towards the nearest junction, for example. However, although these are very modern in the late 1990s, they are already kind of old-fashioned currently, because more and more we are seeing a development towards what's currently still a vision, but what is definitely going to become reality in a few years' time, what we may call a personal intelligent travel assistant. This, what we might call a PITA in abbreviation, would give dynamic information, which means that the information is not being subtracted from historical counts, but is actually based on predictions of traffic jams and travel times in the future. And as another distinguishing characteristics of such a PITA, the information is mobile and location based. So for example, you will get the information not through a variable message sign or a home-based computer, but through your cell phone. The cell phone knows where you are and gives you the relevant information given your place and time in a transport network. It is multimodal. It provides multimodal information, being that it also provides information about bus, tram, metro, train, in addition to providing traffic information. And finally, the next generation of travel information will be personalized. It will not advise me to take a car when the information service knows that I don't own a car. But also more subtle dynamics there are being taken care of. For example, whether or not people have a discount card for transit makes them more susceptible to reacting favorably on public transport information. So as a whole, we might say that the next generation of travel information, as opposed to what we've been seeing the past few decades, will deliver us being the travelers, all the information they need, irrespective of their place and time in the transport network, and focused and tailored based on their personality traits and their needs and their preferences. So this is a very nice vision of technological developments, and I'm not the only one who feels that way, because there has been a very big spending spree in the field of travel information. Governments, for example, have been paying a lot of money to spur the developments because they see a lot of benefits, not only for individual travelers, which what we call user benefits, the benefits for me as a traveler when I use travel information, but also, and this is for governments very important, there are benefits associated with this next generation of information that are important for society as a whole. For example, by having a more efficient and more sustainable spread of traffic through a multimodal transport network. Of these two benefits, the user benefits are becoming increasingly dominant. And why is that? So in the 80s and 90s we had a big role for government, and we're seeing that private parties are taking over now because of the fact that mobile phones are so much more capable of distributing travel information than they were 10 years ago. Mobile phones are typically not owned by the government but by yourself. You buy them, you buy subscriptions, and more we are seeing that mobile phone operators offer you navigation tools, etc., but also traffic information, dynamic traffic information on your cell phone. So these cell phones are becoming the key medium for distributing travel information, and that is why increasingly the government has been stepping out of this arena, and private parties, companies like Vodafone, Google, TomTom, are stepping in. These companies, and we can't blame them for doing so, they don't care that much about the impacts for society as a whole, but they care about the user benefits. They care about the value for specific travelers because, and that's the reasoning behind this whole story, travelers might be willing to pay for travel information to the extent that they feel that the information is beneficial for them. So we're not talking about benefits for society, for environment, etc., but we're purely talking about consumer benefits. What is in it for me as a traveler, and what am I willing to pay for travel information? And then there's a problem, or what we call in academia a challenge or a knowledge gap. It's something we do not know and that we want to know. User benefits, so the benefit to individual travelers, are notoriously difficult to assess. They are notoriously difficult to model mathematically and to predict. It basically boils down to a very basic question: how should we value information? This is not just a question, a research topic within transportation, but it has been haunting, in fact, people in economic sciences for decades, and a lot of work has been done in this regard. And as you will see in the following slides, I've been building on that work to try to develop a generic approach to describe the value or the benefits for users of different types of information. And with generic, I mean that you don't have to redo every computation for every single information service. No, that you have a model that is able to predict user benefits for a variety of situations, for a variety of travelers, for a variety of travel information services. So what is this approach to the valuation of travel information? What I want to do is to predict whether or not someone will acquire information at a given cost. This is basically what companies need to know before they invest in the development of travel information services. I want to give the answer as a function of, or specific to, or given the choice situation. So obviously the value of travel information differs between trip purposes, between different choice situations in terms of whether or not there's a lot of alternatives available. Let me give a very brief example of that. When I am in my car towards a job interview, to be on time is very important for me. When I'm in my car towards the beach with my children to go and make a walk, travel time is far less important. So the user benefits of travel time information will differ between these two trip purposes. And also when there is not a single alternative for me, so when I'm stuck in traffic and I know there's no alternative route for me, the value of information will also be lower. Things like that, we all know them, they are all very intuitive, but capturing them in a mathematical model that gives accurate predictions is something else. I want these predictions also to be a function of the type of information. Will it be travel time information? Will it be information about parking? Will it be route guidance? All sorts of travel information types. I want them all to be covered in these measures. I also want them to be a function of information quality, the prior knowledge of the traveler, and to be personalized, the traveler's personal preferences and personality traits. So this is kind of a list of things that we demand from a model that values the user benefits of information. how should one go about and do this? What I've been doing the past few years is building on what's called microeconomic search theory. Search theory is actually nothing else than a mathematical account of the intuitive notion that information is valuable to the extent that it helps you make better choices. So this is a very intuitive and even open door statement, but translating it into mathematics has been helping economists value information in a variety of contexts over the past decades. And I've made some extensions to these models of search theory that broaden the scope of these models and make sure that they fit in a transportation domain. Transportation being one of the most complicated choice environments people face. Far more complicated than picking one of a few washing powders from a supermarket is the choice whether or not to depart at all, when to depart, which route, which mode to take, when to get out of a bus, etc. So I won't go over all of them, but I think it is crucial to mention at this point that my extension of this search theoretical approach is that I capture what we can call fully rational travelers and less rational travelers. And with fully rational travelers, I refer to those that are actually willing to try to find the optimal route each time they leave their house, for example. With less rational travelers, I refer to you and me, being people that don't really care about this 10 seconds decrease in travel time, or that don't really go about finding information about the best route each time when they go to the same work location, for example, but rather choose in a more or less habitual way. My models, my extension of this search theory, they take into account that people might differ in terms of how they make choices, and these models can capture that. That's one extension, and another is that I've translated these notions from economy into an econometric model. Econometrics is nothing but economics plus statistics. So I've added modules, so to say, to the models that helps researchers like me perform statistical analysis. And that's very useful when you want to analyze data. And that data, of course, I've collected, because what's a model without a proper test? And for a proper test, you need data. This empirical testing of this model I did with a laboratory study. I'm not sure time allows to go very much into depth here, but what I've been showing people, and this is obviously something far more simple than current PlayStations, it even was in 2005 when I collected this data, but still it met the purpose of testing this model. I let people sit behind a computer and have them make a number of artificial trips, for which they had a number of alternatives available, some car alternatives, some public transport alternatives like bus and train. But people did not know all of them, and they also did not know the travel times, the travel costs. They did not know whether they had a seat in public transport. They didn't know departure times of buses and trains. But, and that's in this part of the slide, people were able to buy for euros information about all these alternatives, and they could also generate new alternatives when they were not happy with the options shown to them in the first place. So what I observed there is, by having a few hundred people make a lot of trips in this very artificial environment, I observed when people acquired information and how they reacted to messages. And this first question, when they acquired information, is the key to estimating what is the value of information for them. Because the idea is then when information is not valuable for someone, he or she will not acquire the information. So based on the observed choices, combining those choices with the econometric model that was developed, I was able to see what was the value of information in specific instances for specific trip purposes. Because if we go back one slide, the little text on the low end described, for example, a trip purpose, like I said, a job interview or a trip to the beach, etc. So we could estimate, we could extract the value of information from a number of manipulated experimental settings and compute whether our model made good predictions. And to be short, it did quite well. It predicted quite well how travelers responded to the information in this, I must admit, very artificial environment. In other words, travelers appeared to deal with the information in a meaningful and a predictable way. And that in itself was quite a nice finding, because in transportation, many transportation planners and policymakers consider travelers to be kind of herd animals, not the most cleverest of people to be standing still in some traffic jam day after day. How smart can you be then? Well, in fact, travelers appear to be fairly smart in how they deal with the large complexity of transport networks. They very well know when information is valuable to them, and travelers very well know how to intelligently respond to received messages. So perhaps travelers are more rational than we thought they were. That's an empirical finding. For me, it was as much as interesting as this empirical finding. It was nice to see that the developed model did quite well in predicting when travelers would acquire information, because that suggests that the developed model also is able to pinpoint the value of information, and that in turn is useful obviously for private parties who develop this type of information. So the obvious next steps is to apply this in practice, away from the computer screen into the roads. And as another next step, because technology moves faster than I can model, I'll have to catch up with some of the latest developments that we are currently seeing. Travel information is on the move, and so are we. So I might give you an update in a few months or years' time. Thank you.